"Ethan, you can't be so trusting. You're just like your father," Penelope said, holding her crying grandson close. "Don't cry. We'll go to the sheriff right now." "He's young, but he's attentive and responsive. Maybe he can help," she told him. Just 15 minutes ago, some kids outside asked Ethan to let them ride his new bicycle, and then left with it. The bike was found a few days later, broken. He started to cry again. "Don't cry. I think we can fix it. Come to me later this evening. I've got some parts somewhere in my garage. We'll fix it and make it good as new," the sheriff told the boy. "And remember, it's important to trust people, but not everyone, and not always." Ethan tried to apply that rule to his life, but he was still very trusting. Ethan became the butt of the joke many times over, and some of his classmates' jokes were fairly cruel. His grandma always sighed and said he was just like his father, her son. "Your father was trusting. He believed everyone and forgave everyone to an extent. Sometimes he would get furious and everyone would flee," Penelope said. Ethan loved hearing about his dad. He didn't remember his mother at all. She died when he was just a year old, but he vaguely remembered his dad. He was a tall, strong man. Ethan remembered that he always carried him on his shoulders. He also remembered how he would throw him up and catch him. It was fun and scary. But then, everything changed. His grandma always said it was his trusting nature and temper to blame. He worked in a car shop. His boss told him some expensive parts were being brought, but he was in a rush, so he asked Ethan's father to sign the documents, and the delivery men would load the parts themselves. He was as trusting as ever and did what he was asked, but was accused of theft a few days later. The parts never made it, and the papers were signed. He got so angry he wrecked his boss's office and almost killed him. He was taken to jail and then to court. She never told Ethan the details, and he only knew that his father never came home. He remembered how Penelope cried at night and ran to the police almost every day to sign some request or submit requests. But it was to no avail. Ethan knew that Penelope still believed her son was alive and would come back one day. It was Ethan's graduation today. He had never been popular in school. Because he was naive and trusting, he'd been mocked and ridiculed many times, so Ethan kept to himself. The graduation was no exception. He sat to the side and just watched what happened. He got home earlier than planned. Penelope wasn't home, and Ethan thought she was probably at her neighbor's with whom she had been friends with for many years. He lay down in his room and fell asleep unexpectedly. When he opened his eyes, he was surprised it was morning. "Good morning," he called, but no one answered. It was odd because Ethan and Penelope had begun their mornings the same for many years. He never closed his bedroom door at night. Every morning he would wake up and scream, "Good morning!" And Penelope would appear just smiling in his door seconds later, and they'd go get breakfast. But there was no Penelope today. It was just deathly silent. His heart skipped a beat. He got up and ran around the whole apartment. Everything was left how it was the day before. Penelope hadn't come home. Ethan ran to his neighbor. She said that Penelope wasn't there. She last saw his grandma around 5 p.m. when she went to go somewhere. When she asked Penelope where she was going, Penelope answered mysteriously and said it was a surprise and they'd see soon. Ethan searched for a week and had nothing. He was worried. First his father, now his only other relative and closest loved one disappeared? There was a knock that evening. It was the sheriff. "Ethan, I need to talk to you," he said, and lowered his eyes. Ethan's head was flooded with negative thoughts. "Did you learn something? Did you find her? Is she okay?" he asked impatiently. "Nope, unfortunately not. There's no news about your grandma. I want you to think hard, and you might remember something unusual. Ethan, you're an adult now, so I'll say it like it is. Your apartment is a prize for many people, and they aren't always law-abiding citizens. Penelope's disappearance might be related." Penelope and her husband bought the apartment when they were young. It was big and spacious, but otherwise not exceptional. The neighborhood used to be ordinary as well, but over time, the city grew and everything changed. The apartment building became more elite and had higher property value. very unusual people started buying and living there. There were rumors about a large construction company that had its eyes on its place to build a large office building. After talking to the sheriff, Ethan couldn't sleep. He tried to remember something, but it just didn't work. He went to Penelope's room and opened her closet. He didn't know what he was looking for. He found a box in the corner on the top shelf. He opened it and found a picture of his father on top. There were many papers in the box. Ethan concluded that his father might be alive from one of the letters inside. He also found a written offer to buy their apartment for a very low price. Besides the offer for a ridiculous price, it was also full of threats that Penelope might lose her grandson in addition to her son if she refused to sell. After reading it, Ethan remembered that a new neighbor moved in above them a few months prior. Judging by his car, he was wealthy. One day, under the guise of becoming acquainted, he spoke to Ethan. Ethan remembered him asking fairly strange questions that he didn't pay much attention to at the time. He asked Ethan who he lived with, where his parents were, and if he had any other relatives. Ethan called the sheriff, but no one answered. He left a voicemail that he couldn't wait and he was going to go see his neighbor. Ethan knocked on the door. The door opened, and the man was standing there, smiling. "Oh, you figured it out. So if you behave, nothing will happen to your father or grandmother." Ethan had never fought. He always swallowed his anger and left. But he hit this man with all his might and knocked him down. Then, some people ran up and hit Ethan hard in the head and pulled him inside. Before he passed out, Ethan thought he saw his father and Penelope's faces. His father looked different than Ethan remembered, but he was sure it was him. Then he thought he heard police bursting in. Ethan woke up in the hospital. He saw two worried faces above him. It was his father and Grandma. It turned out that Ethan's father was found innocent in court, but he was jumped on his way home. He was seriously beaten and taken and left on the side of some road. His strong body let him survive. He was accidentally found by a woman who took him home. He was physically all right, but had amnesia. He and the woman loved each other, and he stayed with her. During their time together, she helped him get new documentation. Everything was good, but he couldn't rest from thoughts about his past. He decided to start searching. The day she disappeared, Penelope finally met her son. But remembering her, Ethan, and his previous life was only possible by surviving more stress. When they came home, they were kidnapped by unknown men and taken into the apartment. They were the gang who was trying to blackmail Penelope into selling her apartment. Who knows what would have happened if Ethan's voicemail hadn't saved their lives. Another surprise for Ethan was that he had a sister. As soon as Ethan got home, his father and his wife and daughter moved in with them, and they became one big happy family.